In the last 24 hours, one of the biggest winter storms in recent U.S. history has been freezing a 2,000-mile stretch of the country under snow, ice, and dangerous cold. Winter Storm Fern has left more than 1 million customers without power at its peak, shut down over 11,000 flights, and contributed to at least 8 people losing their lives, with the overall toll likely in the low double digits, according to early tallies. Here is the important part. For more than 200 million people, this is only the beginning.
Oh no.
Over the past 24 hours, Winter Storm Fern has evolved from a regional threat into a coast-to-coast winter emergency. Federal forecasters now classify it as a major January winter storm, one of the most significant cold season events of 2025-26 in North America. A deep low-pressure system combined with an Arctic air mass dropping south has pulled snow, sleet, and freezing rain across a band stretching from New Mexico and Texas all the way to New England. According to the National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center, this shield of snow and ice extends for roughly 2,000 miles across the continent. At the same time, the human footprint of this storm is staggering. A meteorologist speaking to Al Jazeera estimates that around 213 million people are under some form of winter weather alert, advisory, or warning. That means more than half of the U.S. population is dealing with heavy snow, ice, dangerous wind chills, or the risk of power outages and travel disruption. Here is the important part. The Weather Prediction Center warns that the impacts will not end when the last flakes fall, because a pool of bitterly cold air is locked in behind the storm and will keep snow and ice in place into the new week. In practical terms, the last 24 hours have brought heavy snow from the Ohio Valley into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, while a thick band of sleet and freezing rain has coated parts of the Deep South and Southeast. From Texas and Louisiana through Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, and the Carolinas, ice has snapped trees and power lines and turned roads into sheets of glass. And as this shield of snow and ice spreads, the first hard numbers are starting to come in on how many lives have already been lost.
No, because how the fuck is it raining right now in Nashville?
From Saturday night into Sunday, Fern's impact has been measured in lives lost as well as maps covered in blue and white. In Louisiana, state health officials confirmed that at least 2 men in Caddo Parish died from hypothermia after being exposed to brutal cold during the storm. In Austin, Texas, city authorities report that 1 person was found dead in the parking lot of an abandoned gas station, with hypothermia strongly suspected and the final cause of death pending a medical examiner's report. Far to the northeast in New York City, major outlets including The Guardian and The Independent, and later a summary on Wikipedia, described 5 people found dead outdoors in bitter wind and sub-freezing air.
I got them.
These are not just numbers. Each of these cases is tied to specific streets, specific nights, and a simple decision to stay outside a little too long in a storm that punishes even short exposure. Here is the important part. While at least 8 fatalities have been documented in detail in Louisiana, Texas, and New York City, the broader picture is less clear. One international outlet cites at least 7 deaths so far, while a running compilation on a weather impacts account in the Wikipedia page for the January 2026 North American winter storm suggests that the total number of deaths linked to Fern may already be in the range of 12 to 13 across the United States. Authorities and journalists stress that these figures are still preliminary. Many accidents, medical emergencies, and exposure cases are reported with a delay, especially when roads are blocked and power is out in entire neighborhoods. And as investigators try to piece together how many lives have already been lost, millions of people are discovering what it means to ride out this storm without electricity, heat, or a reliable way to travel. If Fern's snowfall and ice maps show where the storm is, the power outage maps show how hard it is hitting daily life. Around midday to late afternoon on Sunday, outage trackers such as Power Outage S, cited by outlets like Al Jazeera, Fox Business, ABC, and The Guardian, showed between 1 million and 1.1 million customers without electricity across the United States at the same time. Tennessee was at the center of this crisis, with roughly 290,000 to more than 300,000 customers in the dark at peak. Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas each reported more than 100,000 customers without power at different points during the day, as ice-coated trees and lines failed in rapid succession. Georgia faced its own emergency. Axios Atlanta reports that more than 80,000 people lost power in North Georgia, with state emergency managers warning that trees were coming down in almost every county with ice. In Kentucky, West Virginia, Alabama, and Virginia, tens of thousands more customers were cut off from the grid as the day went on. In Nashville's Davidson County, Weather.com notes that over 85% of tracked customers lost electricity after heavy ice brought down large, mature trees onto lines and transformers. Here's the important part. These are not just brief flickers. With temperatures plunging and roads coated in ice, crews are struggling to reach broken infrastructure, which means many families may spend multiple nights without reliable heat. At the federal level, the Department of Energy issued emergency orders allowing ERCOT in Texas and PJM in the Mid-Atlantic to temporarily relax some environmental and regulatory limits on power generation in an effort to prevent an even wider collapse of the grid. Those measures underscore how close parts of the system are to overload as demand for heat spikes. And while millions sit in cold, dark homes, the storm is also ripping through another critical network that Americans depend on every day: the transportation system in the sky and on the ground. For many people, Fern's impact is measured less in inches of snow and more in the trips they never took. On Sunday alone, more than 11,000 flights within, into, or out of the United States were canceled, according to flight-aware figures cited by ABC News, making it one of the worst weather-related disruption days in recent U.S. aviation history. ABC also reports that at least 2,500 flights scheduled for Monday were canceled in advance on Sunday afternoon, as airlines tried to move crews and aircraft out of the way of the storm. Fox Business, drawing on the same data source, notes that over 10,000 flights were canceled Sunday on top of more than 4,000 cancellations on Saturday, turning the whole weekend into a rolling shutdown of air travel. Specific airports became symbols of how severe Fern has been. At Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport near the U.S. Capitol, all Sunday flights were canceled. In Philadelphia, most flights were either canceled or delayed for long hours. Major hubs in New York, Boston, Dallas, and Atlanta reported waves of cancellations and knock-on delays, stranding passengers on concourses and in hotel lobbies as crews fought snow, ice, and powerful crosswinds. Here is the important part. The problems are not limited to the skies. On the ground, black ice and heavy snow have turned sections of the interstate system from Arkansas and Tennessee through Kentucky, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York into dangerous corridors with reduced speed limits, temporary bans on trucks and trailers, and outright closures on some stretches to clear wrecks and plow compacted snow. In Pennsylvania, Weather.com describes large avalanche piles of plowed snow closing Coxton Road in Duryea, with some mounds reaching 10 to 15 feet high, forcing police to warn drivers to stay away. In Virginia, a compilation of official reports lists 177 traffic crashes during the storm period, a snapshot of what is happening across dozens of states as ice takes drivers by surprise. Amtrak has canceled or shortened multiple trains along the Washington, Philadelphia, New York-Boston corridor, while buses around Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia are running minimal service. and the Metro rail system is operating on a reduced weekend-style schedule, according to local outlets and WTOP updates. And as planes are grounded, highways shut, and trains cut back, the next 24 hours will show, region by region, how deeply this storm is rearranging basic routines like school, work, and even a simple commute across town. To understand how far Fern reaches, you have to look at the map region by region. In the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, the storm has delivered the kind of snowfall that shuts down entire cities. ABC News reports around 15 inches of snow in Midland, Pennsylvania, 13 inches in Bridgeport, Connecticut, 12 inches in Ridgefield, New Jersey, and 11 inches in New York City's Bronx. Weather Prediction Center summaries add 12 inches in Wayne, New Jersey, and around 10 to 12 inches in Levittown. Locust Valley and White Plains around New York City, even Washington, D.C., has picked up more than 5 inches in neighborhoods like Adams Morgan, enough to paralyze side streets and hilltop roads. In New York City, officials have already decided to close the entire public school system on Monday and move to remote learning, while the subway keeps running on a reduced schedule and many bus routes struggle through deep slush and ice. Farther west from Missouri and Illinois through Indiana and Ohio, Fern has stacked up a thick, heavy snowpack. In the last 24 hours, forecasters note roughly 12 inches in Farmington, Missouri, 11 inches in Johnston City, Illinois, 13 inches in Fricton, Indiana, with many nearby locations at 10 to 11 inches, and about 11 inches in Beaver Creek in Middletown, Ohio. Pittsburgh has seen around 8.5 inches, and Philadelphia International Airport more than 7 inches. Here is the important part. These are not isolated pockets. They represent long corridors where highways, small towns, and mid-sized cities are all digging out at the same time, competing for plows, salt, and crews just to reopen basic routes to hospitals, warehouses, and grocery stores. In the Deep South and Southeast, the threat looks different but feels just as severe. Instead of deep powder, a stripe of ice from Texas through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, and the Carolinas has turned trees into crystal and roads into traps. Weather.com reports about 1 inch of freezing rain near Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, and similar 1-inch ice totals in Glen, Mississippi, Cherokee, Alabama, and Rayville, Louisiana, with around 3/4 of an inch in Clayton, Georgia, and Brentwood, Tennessee. In Georgia, officials say trees are down in almost every iced-over county. More than 80,000 customers are without power in the north of the state. Public offices in the northern half will close on Monday, and state parks are being used as warming centers. The governor has declared a statewide emergency and called up around 500 National Guard troops. And while the Deep South struggles with ice, and the plains and southern Midwest still deal with older snow from earlier in the storm, forecasters are already looking at what tonight and tomorrow will bring in terms of fresh snow bands, lingering ice, and a dangerous, long-lasting blast of Arctic cold. Even as crews dig out and repair damage, Fern is not finished. Forecasts from the National Weather Service and its Weather Prediction Center show heavy snow continuing across the Northeast into Monday morning. The core snow band stretches from the Ohio Valley through Pennsylvania and New Jersey into New York and New England, with many locations expected to finish this event with 12 to 18 inches of total snowfall by the time the storm pulls away into the Atlantic. South of the main snow zone, leftover pockets of sleet and freezing rain are still brushing parts of the Carolinas and the southern mid-Atlantic, keeping roads slick and power lines under strain through Sunday night. Behind the storm, an even more dangerous phase is taking shape: the deep, lingering cold. NWS warnings emphasize that the Arctic air mass trailing Fern will lock snow and ice in place for days in many regions, slowing power restoration and making every trip outside more hazardous. Al Jazeera, citing meteorological briefings, notes that wind chill values in the northern plains and upper Midwest could drop below -50 degrees Fahrenheit or around -45 degrees Celsius. Here is the important part. At those levels, exposed skin can begin to freeze in just a few minutes, turning a broken-down car or a short walk across an open parking lot into a medical emergency. When you put the numbers together, the scale becomes clear. Roughly 213 to perhaps 230 million people under winter alerts. More than 1 million customers at peak without power on Sunday. Over 11,000 flights canceled in a single day, and at least a dozen or more deaths likely linked to the storm, with figures still being updated. Officials and scientists are careful about drawing conclusions while the emergency is still unfolding. But they agree on one thing. Fern is a reminder of how a single, well-organized winter storm can test power grids, transportation networks, and public safety systems across an entire continent at once. And as those lessons are debated in briefing rooms and news conferences, millions of people are still focused on something much simpler: getting through the next long, cold night safely with their families. By the end of this 24-hour period, Fern is more than just a headline about a winter storm. It is a chain of very personal disruptions stretched across a continent. Families in Tennessee and Georgia, wrapped in blankets in dark, silent houses. Commuters in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston staring at train boards full of cancellations. Parents in the Midwest shoveling driveways before dawn so they can reach work, or a hospital, or a grocery store that may open late, if at all. The numbers are stark. More than 1 million customers without power at peak, over 11,000 flights canceled in a single day, at least a dozen lives likely lost. But behind every statistic is a story of people trying to adapt hour by hour. Here is the important part. Even in the middle of this emergency, neighbors are checking on each other, cities are opening warming centers, crews are working through the night, and communities are proving once again that resilience is built from the ground up. As you watch these images and listen to these updates, ask yourself, if a storm like Fern hit your region, how prepared would your household really be for days of cold, darkness, and disruption? If you found this report useful, consider sharing it, leaving a comment with your own experience of extreme weather, and subscribing for more updates so you do not face the next major storm alone.